to the Energy Tech Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Flores, here in sunny San Diego, California, as part of Inductive Automation and Ignition Solar and Battery Discovery Day. And I'm with a really cool guest, which is Mr. Patrick Arjento, a control systems engineer at Claros Tech, or Claros. Patrick, good to have you, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, good to have you on the show. And, before we dive in, I reached out to you. You reached back out and said, hey, there's some things I definitely want to talk about.
For sure.
And we're going to dive into that. But before we do that, I want you to kind of introduce to the audience who you are, what you do. I mean, I got your title in there, but what you actually do there at Claros. And then what brought you to SBDD?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give a quick introduction of myself. So I'm Patrick Arjento. I work at Claros, small startup of around, I think, 30 people at this point.
Yeah.
But, when I got out of college, I went into the energy industry as a SCADA's application engineer, which is where I got my start in ignition, working in SCADA for oil and gas pipelines.
Okay.
But I did a stint in that area, worked in Houston, Texas. But then I moved out to Los Angeles area for Claros, which is a startup company developing power solutions for data centers.
Yes.
So as a control systems engineer, I do both the hardware, software, basically anything and everything in regards to, the whole development of all of our products.
Yeah.
Specifically our power gateway product, which is the one I work on.
So it sounds to me like what you did was you were in energy, oil and gas, which is one of my favorite industries, by the way. I know we're here at BESS. I'm from Texas myself, so it's just a natural inclination. But at the same time, it sounds like what you've done, what I've done, which is you graduated from that to becoming almost a full stack developer is really 100%. What you graduated to, because people start in control systems, which is the unsexy side of technology in my mind. And then from there, people graduate towards the stack, meaning they start at that RTU, PLC level. They integrate in ignition, we'll say, or in SCADA platforms. They move into distributed controls. And then from there, they're starting to integrate with business systems, ERP, MES, or execution systems, other distributed platforms. And next thing you know, the whole idea is to get that data from the sensor level at the edge all the way up into the business.
That's 100% correct. I mean, I think you talk to so many engineers, especially in oil and gas, they work in the unsexy side for a long time.
They do.
Then all of a sudden they discover ignition through some sort of way, and then they're just launched into like every industry possible.
Yeah.
Because ignition is just so powerful in this sense, right? I mean, that's how I got my start, how I've talked to friends about the same way. And now, we're enabled to do like the entire stack at this point, and it's only going to get, I think, better from here.
No, I think you're right. Especially with the release of 8.3 and a lot of the features inside of Ignition, you've got lots of what I call data orchestration implementation that's there. You've got industrial improvements. We saw today the integration with Tiger Data and Timescale DB.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you have such a platform. I don't see Ignition as a SCADA platform. I see it as an IoT platform.
It's the entirety of it, right?
Yeah.
It's SCADA. I mean, what they used to use SCADA, HMI platform.
Yes.
It's the platform for everything in industry.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah, and let me ask you this, because you've obviously graduated, moved into that area.
Oh, for sure.
What is your background? Did you start in controls, or were you in like computer science? Tell me about that.
So I went to University of Florida. I did my degree in electrical engineering.
Okay, you're double E?
Actually a student again at UCLA, doing a master's in double E.
Okay.
My background was in embedded systems. I did an internship in defense, focused on circuit and computer hardware development in that area. And then, I got a job out in Houston. It was like, we were doing software in oil and gas. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, that seemed interesting at the time. It was, where I wanted to go. And, it's like everything, right? In life, it changes. So, it kind of came from a diverse background, but always an interest in, systems, especially, with computers. I mean, ignition is like everything, right? Software, hardware, edge hardware, stuff like that.
Yes. And now, right now at Claros, obviously you're out of energy, oil and gas. Well, I would say there's still a connection, only because when we start talking about BESS or solar or even data center, there's now going to be great demand for what we call off-grid power.
Yes.
Which is the ability to use natural gas, right, or compressed natural gas for the feed of the data center.
Oh yeah.
Because grids are overused. I mean, they're overextended, and so right now's the time for off-grid or natural gas usage. And so in knowing that, there's a rising intersection between not just power demand for BESS, which is what we're here about, solar and battery storage, but in the data center, they both share that same kindred request for power, the request for resources, people, and then we'll talk about artificial intelligence, but I want to get your take on that convergence right there.
So, I mean, the data center is demanding power, right?
Yes.
You know, it used to be just from the grid. They weren't really prepared for, you know, this sort of load that we're seeing with AI.
Right.
And really, they're designing all these data centers, retrofitting old ones with all power sources. Solar, BESS, wind, any energy they can get, natural gas, you know, they're going to want it. I mean, you know, you see all these different projects on different sources of energy we've never seen before. So we're coming into like this, I guess like a threshold or like this point in time where this power demand is like as big as it's ever been, and it's getting bigger, and we have to integrate all power into one location, especially for the data center.
And I think you're right. So because you have the intersection of these power platforms, right? So we talked about if it's microgrid, if it's battery storage, if it's energy, compressed natural gas, But that's only one part of it, because you still have the elements of liquid cooling. You still have the elements of, you know, heat. You still have PDU monitoring. You still have power monitor or
data hall monitoring too. There's so much in the data center itself that is removed, you know, just from the power side.
Absolutely. And so because you have that, you also have commingled protocols.
Yes.
So now you've got the addition of older, even CAN bus, believe it or not, older forms of, you know, RTU protocols. You still have Modbus TCP. You still got tons of DNP3. And you still see the rise of MQTT, Kafka at some data centers on the data side. So in knowing that, what in your mind is probably one of the biggest bottlenecks that you're seeing aside from just the power demand?
I mean, you kind of just mentioned this before, is that there's so many different communication protocols and standards. And then I think one side is you're seeing, you know, data centers or other industries may not be used to these sort of protocols.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well, how do we, you know, especially as an integrator, how do we make it easier to just do that integration, right? You know, one of the answers is ignition, and then the support for those protocols, and the support for that openness and being willing to be flexible across that area, right? So I think that's like, you know, one of the most important points on like, and one of my most biggest concerns is like, how do we best prepare for this transition that's coming up, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I want to dive a little bit deeper, because that is just the surface of power, you know, data, and, you know, all of the protocols. But I think one of the bottlenecks that you and I talked about, you want to talk about, is there's obviously lots of engineering hours that are spent configuring tag hierarchies, scripting custom event logic. You got to map PLC points for utility scale assets. And I think there's a rise for an agent solution for that.
100%.
I want to get into that with you a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, when I'm used to it, and I think about this all the time, is like, you know, the typical way is like a company is hired and you have like a team of, you know, a whole bunch of engineers just for one site, for one project, right? It's a project-based thing. And they're all working on one small thing of one system. And that is, I mean, we know it's a lot of work, just and especially to test it, validate it, make sure it's right, especially, you know, there's a lot of pressure on like making things fast in this industry, avoidance of downtime. You're pressured, you know, to make less mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, with AI agents, right, I think Ignition 8.3 is a very huge platform that is capable of taking advantage of this, right? You know, when 8.3 came out, they basically turn everything into a file structure where everything is editable as code. Infrastructure is code, right?
Correct.
I mean, even the gateway is the same way. So that just lets AI agents do whatever to all of that code, right? And, you know, you can take, you know, if you aren't familiar with agents, you can just take a Claude code, download it off the internet, and just use the GUI, point it to your Ignition project, and, you know, just start playing around with it. Now, I will say, don't just do it on a production system. That's not a great idea for those, you know, out there familiar. But, you know, you can experiment it, start getting used to using agents. And then, you know, seeing, like, you know, start changing, like, perspective screens or JSON files, or, you know, soon, if you have access to it, you know, there's going to be MCP for Ignition coming out pretty soon here, right? And that's going to enable even a lot more, because that's basically, you can have your agent next to your ignition screen, type to your agent just using natural language.
You're right.
And then the MCP, with
no
ignition.
workarounds, no API hookups.
Exactly.
We're talking about straight MCP. The other thing is that one of the things I love about Ignition is, so you're right. I think what you're saying here is, hey, it's not just the agent, but it's data orchestration. So infrastructure as code is going to allow us to do that. So we shift away from doing a lot of these things manually to creating that CI/CD pipeline in its true form, right?
Yes, and that's where agents are going to be so important, because I think when people start using agents, it's more like do one simple task, and then keep doing that over and over. What really the big advantage is going to be is like the whole horizontal integration across the whole workflow.
That's right, and you can have 50 agents.
Oh yeah.
Because why? They're not a full-time body. They're 50 agents that conduct activity. And they could have one agent that does one thing or one agent does another.
That's right.
But you can deploy these agents and it still has zero impact to a full-time engineer. You know what I mean?
So you tell your agent to spawn sub-agents, and guess what? You have a bunch of workers, essentially.
Yes.
And then the biggest thing is, and I think that's the biggest concern of a lot of people is, well, how is it safe? How do we verify it works? Well, agents will ask feedback, especially, certain platforms, keep the human in the loop. That's probably the biggest important thing about agents and, developing industrial level software.
Yes.
Because we need to be kept in the loop, understand what's being changed.
Yes.
You don't want any sort of, random change on the tag that, if it goes down, it brings down the whole system. But I think that's also a hugely important aspect, is those guardrails, the human in the loop, the review process with everyone, but you can still automate the workflow and take away a lot of the grunt work and then focus on like the core work and making things better.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anytime I look at these types of opportunities, usually what I do, Patrick, is I put them in 3 categories in my mind all the time. I look at cost.
Yes, cost.
Complexity, and cybersecurity.
100%.
I think the minute that you step out of what you're doing technically and say, okay, I'm going to put these things in this category, one thing I can see is with Ignition, because you have such capability for on-prem, Ignition Edge, Ignition Cloud Edition, you have modules that can quickly transport data via MQTT. You have that type of capability, a Kubernetes capability. You're really not adding a huge amount of cost. In terms of complexity, I think just like you said, there's that ability to sort and create those agent solutions that is entirely capable with that file structure, which reduces complexity, and with UDTs, you're making it repeatable.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then, you could even, use agents to, do a high-level design of UDTs and structures and, sending information over about your system, as long as, you're careful of what you provide, because agents work best when you provide them context, documentation, kind of like the idea of what you're doing, and it can create really good outputs.
Yeah, I think the last one is cyber. That's always it's just a concern. We had another guest. We were talking about making sure that whatever we do in cyber, that there's still enablement, because at the end of the day, cash is king, and 100%. So is production. Like, we have to stay on. We want to be on at those 5 nines. We want to continue to produce. You saw this when you were in oil and gas and your transition into this industry. It didn't change the fact that power needed to be delivered, data needed to be delivered, crude oil needed to be delivered. It didn't matter. That all needed to remain the same. And that, in a lot of cases, takes precedent over, hey, how are we going to secure? I'm not saying you shouldn't secure it. I'm just saying that enablement needs to be something that you look at when you're talking about cyber.
I 100% agree with that. It's hard, to handle the cyber aspect of all this, especially in a very changing environment, especially with models. But there are ways to be safe about it. But also, like we just talked about, like, we can use this to reduce downtimes, right?
Yeah.
And then, we need to keep moving forward in this space, but also, like, take those steps back, look at the cyber aspects of it, because there are ways you can make this safe. And then, I think the whole goal would be that everyone in this industry could gain value and, reduce costs with the use of AI agents. Now, of course, there is cost using agents when you pay them money and they want to use their model. But, I think even if you go on LinkedIn, you're going to see so many people spread a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
And then, you can take those ideas and try to run with it. And, I always in my back of my mind are like, oh, well, how can I apply this to your mission? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's like an important aspect, and you can still, be safe. Think about the cyber aspect, data retention policies. There are ways to go about this now. I think a year ago it may have been a bit different,
right.
But I think today the landscape, and will change tomorrow.
Yes. And let me ask you this, in terms of what is Claros doing to help in that, especially bringing kind of short time to value and getting rid of like linear engineering timelines and maybe creating a shorter time to value on projects. Is Claros doing that? Is your team kind of part of that?
I mean, I think, the big thing about Claros is that, we are a small company.
Yeah.
We have a very huge growth mindset, and we're a very forward-thinking company, right? Now, we have a bunch of experts from different industries that think about this. And, we want to move fast, but also, keep safe at the same time. So we are trying to think about, those exact ideas. It's like, well, how do we deliver faster and still deliver with quality, and then but keep like the requirements of like our customers or of like the industry demands like in mind, and keep meeting those. So I think our advantage is that we're a small team, and then we can move fast. We don't have like the general corporate like red tape. That can happen.
It's a startup mode almost.
Yeah, I mean, you have to in this space, especially when, like I keep saying, right, like things change every day in this industry.
Yeah, and so, I want to ask you something. I don't think this is off subject, but I want to ask you, just sitting here with you. Patrick, I've worked with a lot of different folks in this space, and I'm going to share something with you.
Sure.
I actually am a father of 8. My oldest son is actually 32, and
Wow.
my youngest is 19. So I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of my sons on the technology side as an electrical engineer, a developer, the other one in the industrial space, and others. But my thing I've learned is in your mind, do you believe that there's sort of this generational gap right now in this space? Because I notice it only because I get the opportunity to see it in real life and in the workspace. But do you believe that right now, you're a young guy, and I could say that generationally, you would say that you're latching onto agents versus maybe another counterparts, and there might be even some older I wouldn't say older, that's probably a bad thing, but someone that's more experienced, I would say, especially in oil and gas, right?
So, man, I think about that all the time. Like, right now, I mean, my team is so small that, I'm kind of having to depend a lot on myself in this space, right? I don't have that senior developer anymore. But, I still call people from old places, my older mentors, and, I still consult with them. And, as I've gotten older, it used to be a lot of a teacher-student relationship where they're giving me all the information I'm trying to absorb.
Yes.
But as I've come into my own, I'm trying to also give them feedback and educate them on newer tools, and a lot of them have like been really excited about it. So now it's more of like a back and forth.
So there's more of a give and take, not let's not fix anything that's not broken. I don't know if I would try that. AI might take my job scenario, right?
I mean, I think about that a lot, but I don't think we're in that. I think a year ago I thought the same thing, but now it's like there's more work right now than anything.
Absolutely.
So I think also educating people on that and like how it's impacting the industry is a huge thing too.
Yes. So let me ask you this: do you think that some of these agents, are they going to help core engineering teams kind of reduce that talent shortage? Because there is a shortage. I mean, to get in this industry, you don't hear a lot about it. It's not touted. I can find a sexy job with a FANG company, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, right? So people are vying for those sexy jobs. But I think this industry is becoming sexy by the month.
Yes. Oh, I 100% agree. I think there is a shortage.
Yeah.
Now, I think AI can help with the shortage, especially, when you have like a lack of access to younger or older folks, in your groups. I do think a lot of people are getting educated from those other industries about our industry a lot. And, I think, we should, help those guys out. And, it helps because when we help others out, it helps us. And, vice versa, right? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of cross education going on in the industry. But there is definitely a shortage of like talent of like, I probably couldn't put out a JD and say, I need all these skills. Yeah. I probably won't find someone that can, touch every point, right? Yes. But then like at a FANG company, maybe that's different. Right. But no, I think definitely like we can help shorten the gap, by like, talking with others, engaging with the community, but then also, leveraging AI agents, in our core engineering work, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think you're right. And I'm going to ask you just a few more questions. I know, Ben, the guys are here on time, but let me ask you this. When you came to this event, what do you think caught you the most? For me, I'll just share mine. That way, I really enjoyed Mike Friedman talking on Timescale DB, which is now Tiger Data.
Yes.
I'm very hopeful for that. When I saw that, I got real excited about that partnership. So for me, that was a big one. But share yours. I want to hear about what you're taking away from SBDD.
So there's two things. One, the talk of Timescale DB, that was my favorite. Yeah. I think that's going to be a very valuable tool, and honestly, that also with Ignition integrates really well with AI agents.
Yes.
And then also, enabling like large and small companies to like really, expand like their data, make it more performative and like, integrate it with like their AI and data lake. But the really big thing that I take away from this event, and that I also took away from ICC and DCDD, which was Data Center Discovery Day, is that there's a demand of moving fast for these assets, right? Yes. They want, when they commission new assets, they're talking commissioning times of a day. From oil and gas, that's unheard of, right? And yes. But the demand is going to be greater on integrators, on like different companies, on moving with speed. So we see the same topics here at Data Center DD. We'll certainly see at ICC is like, how are you leveraging Ignition to really speed up all of your assets, yes. reducing the time to commissioning and making the integrator jobs easier, right?
Yes.
And I think hopefully at every inductive automation event we're going to keep seeing that more and more, and it's going to continue to rise. So I think that's a big thing I always take away from these events is it's confirming there's a demand, and we're going to need these skills with Ignition 8.3, CI/CD,
yes,
to help us get there.
Yes. Let me ask you this, a couple final questions because we got to go, man. Jeez, I want to keep you, Patrick, but let me ask you in terms of right now, what are you hopeful for in the combination of artificial intelligence and what Ignition is doing?
I think, I think it's like we're going to get to a point where kind of like a lot of other software is we're going to be able to just pull up an AI LLM, right? Yeah. And then you can kind of visualize what you want.
I don't want to say vibe coding.
Vibe ignitioning, vibe screening.
Yeah. Vibe igniting.
But we do see it in a lot of other industries is can you kind of just get a design and make really good screens, feed it standards, there's industrial standards for screen development, right?
Yes.
And we feed that in, we make sure it's all compliant, yes. And then we verify, and that way AI makes things safer, and we're removing a lot of errors, because we make mistakes, right? And that's why bugs exist, right?
Right.
But it's it gives us more confidence that the systems we're building are strong, especially when we integrate with Ignition, which is such a strong piece of software, right? It's reliable, it's dependable, it has so many advanced capabilities. You plug in all sorts of different database technologies into it, and then you have AI, and now it's you complete the line.
Yeah.
You complete the workflow, and then it's okay, now we can focus on the things that we would have cut, yes. We would have had time on.
Yes.
And it makes things so much easier.
Well, I think it puts us at a point where maybe there's a 60 to 70% build, and then you can move and add, right, to
yes.
that. So
yes.
I think that's one of the great things that I'm hopeful for is to see that.
Yes.
Sort of like when you go to the airport and you get on those walkways, it speeds up the path.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And I think that's what it is, and it's going to just enable us to do a lot more productive things, because I hated the grunt work, right?
Yeah.
You're fixing a screen, you're it don't look right. Man, I got to go draw a tank.
Yeah.
Man, that doesn't look right. I'm not an artist. So, it really helps a lot now.
And so that's what you're hopeful for. But let me ask you this. What are your customers asking for?
I mean, I touched upon earlier is speed of delivery, right? It's get in, get out. they want high availability, low downtime. I feel like that's something we always hear in every industry, but it's unprecedented with the demand of it now.
Yes.
I mean, it's just super high, and there's a lot of pressure coming in from customers, and it's like, well, what do you do? Well, you have to deliver. So I think it's like, they want a solution that's strong and like fast, but also high quality, which
Yes.
usually, if you look at a triangle, it usually means high cost.
Yes.
But maybe that will be broken sometime soon. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I think a lot of people are going to come up with some really great things to like address these problems.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're already seeing that with tokenization, where you're seeing that token cost. You have people getting away from, not so much the cloud customers, but moving into a VPC or having a product like NVIDIA with a rack of their own, and using small language models to do work, which still fits the same thing with Ignition, regardless of whether you're a cloud customer, a VPC, or you have something in-house or on-prem.
Exactly.
It still works really great.
Yeah, especially, it's the big thing about Ignition is it's open and agnostic, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really where the industry should be going. It's where it is going.
Yeah.
Software's been like this for such a long time. It's like, it works with everything. And, our industry, is, really coming along that same path. And I think that's what we're going to see over, probably the next 2 years. We're going to see like major change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patrick, are you going to be at ICC?
I actually will not be this year.
You won't be.
Yeah,
Okay.
I went last year.
Okay.
This year there's some conflict, so.
Okay.
But I got to go to both Data Center and SBDD this year, which has been really fun.
All right.
Nice small events. You get to speak to a lot of industry like experts in their domains. So I think these have been really fun. But
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be there. So with
For sure.
that, the Energy Talk podcast
I'll be
will
watching.
be at ICC.
Right
So
on.
if you can, jump in there and comment, even if you're not there.
Of course.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And with that, we want you to like and subscribe also to the Energy Tech podcast. And it was great having my guest, Mr. Patrick Arjento from Claros, here at SBDD with Ignition. And this was a great episode. Thank you so much, Patrick, for being on the show. I'm your co-host, Mike Flores. Thank you so much, man. That was good.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.